Hi. This is the last video I wanted to do before I started the morning lives with the writing. If everything goes well and I'll have the lives figured out, I'll just go live at about 5:30 in the morning for about an hour, maybe a little bit under that depending on the day. And I'm just going to start writing. It may be mundane, although if it's live, I will gladly converse with anybody who's got questions and wishes to talk. Before we get there, though, I wanted to go over a little bit about outlines. I don't do a formal hard outline for any of the books that I personally write for myself. So this is what I've called. Now, I also don't go at this writing thing without any guidance. That's a really difficult production. I've got specific scenes in mind. I have specific points that need to be reached, milestones, that kind of thing. So this is what I call a pantser outline. This is a little bit different than a hard and fast outline that you maybe learned in school, college, middle school, wherever you start learning outlines. I can't even remember. Excuse me. Sorry. In this case, like I said, it's a pantser outline. I start with the concept. So for the story that I'm working on, obviously in this case, I'm not giving you all the information, just the way I come up with my information, because I'm not trying to spoil the story for anybody. You'll understand what I mean in a moment, though. Concept. In this case, I'm talking about two young women meet through a mirror in time. They grow up. They grow up together. They reach milestones together and share experiences through the mirror. Now, this mirror simply connects the two girls. So, that's how this works. Consider it temporal Skype. I apologize again. Getting over a cold. So we start with an introduction chapter. And this is where you meet each part of these two main characters. You may meet a couple of other people, but the real focus in the introduction chapter is always your first couple, your primary characters. So in this case, we're going to meet Mary about 1930 in her New York room. And then that'll be the first half. And then you're going to meet in 1990 in her New York bedroom. Okay. Now, in this case, I just include some important notes that'll kind of tie them together. Okay. When the mirror is plugged on the same day, year, decades apart, it activates a temporal connection and they meet. Now, I will probably show both halves of that meeting and what led up to it for both characters, and that'll be the introduction chapter. Okay. Now, from there, we have certain milestones that have to be met. Now, I'm not going to sit for sure that this is going to be one chapter before we meet this milestone, or it's going to be the next chapter before we meet this milestone. But we have some milestones to meet. So in this case, I'm going to put in milestone 1. is conflict that leads to agreement not to share the future with each other. Okay, that's milestone number 1, and they're going to make this promise from their deepest hearts in the intention of looking out for each other. So, there's that. Milestone 2, this is where a conflict brings them closer, that each one observes or endures to connect through time. One of those things that was common in the 1930s we'll kind of revisit. So there'll be specific conflicts that they will be able to engage and relate to each other through. So that's the second milestone. 3 is when our past meets our future without knowledge of what is to come. It triggers. I know it's a big trigger word. It triggers unexpected repercussions. For the future. Okay. Now, as we're looking at these potential repercussions, we are looking at, reaching what will really kind of be our 3-act story. Beyond that, then we've got the sending action. Here, I actually typically, I write what I know to be the final scene. And I always know my final scene before I even start a book. And I typically write it as I see it here. Now, once I start filling in this information, and I start filling in my chapter here, and I fill in whatever chapters reach us to the first milestone, and the second, and the third, I'm able to reshape that final scene so that it flows. But I always know where the story is going. And that's how I kind of pantser my way through my outline. Because I don't know, there are people who are very specific. John meets Jane on this date. And Paul meets Philip on another day. And these 2 people over here encounter this issue, and these 2 people encounter that issue. I don't do that. Like I said, I'm more of a pantser than I am an outline person, but it's important to know where you're going. And that's what I do. I make sure I know where I'm going. I'm not going to write out the final scene for this video because the goal is more to share the process than it is to give you the details. You got a little bit about the concept up here. And then if everything goes well, I will start writing tomorrow. I will see you then. Bye.